Hello and welcome. I'm Excellent. This is my podcast, which means that Rob is here. Hello, Rob.
Hey Teresa.
How are you doing, Rob?
Yeah, I'm okay, thank you. How are you?
I am okay, thank you. Before we get started, I'd like to say that was very nice of all the kind messages that were left for me after Rob's previous video on the stolen tape theory. That was very nice of you guys. Thank you for your kindness. You guys are always so kind. If you are not subscribed, please go ahead and do so. It's cheap. In fact, it's free. And if you would please give this video a thumbs up, that would be greatly appreciated. It really, really does help channels, especially small channels, to be seen and recommended. So, as you know, Rob put out a video a few days ago teasing what this podcast was going to be about, didn't you, Rob?
I certainly did.
And it's going to be about the stone tape theory.
Yep.
Do you have written down the two things that I want you to eventually talk about on the stone tape theory, Rob?
Do I have what, sorry?
The two notes I asked you to take that I wanted you to write down about the stone tape theory to say later?
You want to talk about the...
No, I'm just asking if you have them written down.
Yeah, I've got notes, yeah.
Okay. So, let's talk about stone tape theory, which I hope you guys find interesting. Rob and I, as Rob said before, find it very interesting. And it's a paranormal thing, but it has been scientifically studied. But it's kind of a hard thing also to study scientifically because, what is it that you're looking for exactly? Is it energy? Is it some type of readouts that you're looking for? Like, can you go into a building like, say, the Alamo and see if there's something in the walls? How would you go about doing that? So, of course, when it comes to things like paranormal things, so the scientific community doesn't usually jump on board on that.
They don't want to prove it. In my opinion, they don't want to prove it, because if they prove it, then it opens the door to so much more.
Like what?
Well, if they prove that the stone tape theory is an actual thing, then they're going to have, well, one would suspect that they would have to look at the whole spectrum of supernatural paranormal stuff. Do ghosts exist? Why they exist? Do demons exist? The list is endless. I think that's why the scientific community are very, very sort of in fear, really, of saying that they believe anything, because it opens the door to too many questions.
Well, they do know that our energy after we pass away doesn't go anywhere. It stays. They do know that we have a life force. That everything has energy. But I think you started getting in, if they started talking about, verifying stone tape theory, then they'd also have to talk about afterlife and what happens after you die. But before we get started, for those people who don't know, I'm going to tell you what the stone tape theory is. How's that? That sounds like a good idea, Tracy. Okay, the stone tape theory is speculation that ghosts and hauntings are analogous to tape recordings, and that mental impressions during emotional or traumatic events can be projected into the form of energy, which is recorded onto rocks and other items or replayed under certain conditions. So not just rocks, but
Could be
the
anything.
land. Yeah, the land it's on, the home, the wood, the anything surrounding an event that tends to be that would be traumatic, something extremely traumatic that your energy imprints, or a battlefield, like Rob and I are talking about, battlefields, where a million people died in the Civil War and where so much blood was spilled. And there's not just Rob and I are talking about, there's not just, Gettysburg. There are battlefields all over the South. There's even a battlefield in Arizona, which seemed like they went particularly out of their way. But, all southern states, Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, all these states have battlefields. I've personally been to one in Mississippi. And so does that energy, that memory stay there? Let's see. The idea draws inspiration and similarities with the views of 19th century intellectuals. There's something else I read. They called them 19th century thinkers. And I thought, oh, what a hard job that is. I hope somebody calls me a 21st century thinker. Such as Charles Babbage, Eleanor Sidgwick, and Edmund Gurney. And, there was a time that anything paranormal was in fashion. They wanted to do crystal ball readings and Ouija boards, and they'd have all these rich people get together because it was kind of a rich people thing to get together and, contact the spirits from the dead. And, it was found that most of those were fake, and they made a lot of money. But even, what's the name of the, you guys, I do this. Sorry about that. What's the name of the famous musician? Houdini. He was really into this kind of a thing where the paranormal, and he was going to come back and he was going to talk to his wife and stuff like that. So it was popular around this time. Contemporarily, the concept was popularized in 1972 by a Christmas ghost story called The Stone Tape. It was produced by the BBC, Rob.
Ooh.
Following the play's popularity, the idea and the term stone tape were retrospectively and inaccurately attributed to the British archaeologist turned parapsychologist T.C. Lethbridge, who believed that ghosts were not spirits of the deceased, but were simply non-interactive recordings similar to a movie. So can you explain what that means?
Well, it's thought that what Tracy's just said there is to do with residual hauntings, and there's two types of. There's believed to be two types of hauntings: residual, and which is basically a ghost that will appear, or a spirit that will appear, and it will not interact. It will just, as if it's walking down a corridor or on a battlefield or anywhere. Just it will ignore people. It will be it's like a film reel of something that is there that you can see but won't interact with you. And then there's a second type of hauntings where we're going more towards poltergeists, where they do interact and they do know that you're there, and they make themselves known quite quickly that they're there and they can see you and they want to interact with you, whether you want to interact with them whether or not you do or you don't want to interact with them. But the stone tape theory is more to do with residual hauntings, where, like Tracy's just explained, you could be laying in bed and a ghost will walk across your bedroom, will appear at one wall and walk through another wall, and it completely ignore you. And that may happen every night at 10 o'clock, or every night, or every morning at 1 o'clock in the morning, or you could hear something, and it would be the same time every night, or the same time every year, or the same time whenever something where traumatic incident has happened. On the anniversary of that, there'll be the sound of a stagecoach. That's one of the things at the Jamaica Inn. That's one of the hauntings that they have there. It's residual, where you can hear a horse and cart outside, but there's no, people can't see anything. They can just hear the horse and cart. So that's basically a residual haunting.
Right. Which we're going to talk about more later, about particularly one that Rob is going to talk about at Gettysburg. The stone tape theory could also be derived from the concept of something called place memory. In the early days of the Society for Psychical, which is a terrible word, by the way, research, place memory was considered an explanation for ghostly apparitions, like Rob just said, seemingly connected with certain places. In the late 19th century, two of the SPR involved in investigating, Edmund Gurney and Eleanor Sidgwick, presented views about certain buildings or materials being capable of storing records of past events, which can later be played back by a gifted individual. So if you've ever walked into a place, I think that most people, a lot of people have at some point walked into a place and thought, "Ugh, this is a bad feeling."
Yeah.
That's what that's saying. That's a stone tape theory, that the place holds the feelings of the event as well. And my husband was never, I said this for a long time for people who have been here forever. My husband was a skeptic for a long time. I am a skeptic, and I've had so many things happen to me. So I'm a strange kind of a breed, but he was a skeptic, but things have happened along the line where he's come around to believing. So he's seen things, which we had in our house when we lived in Arizona, which I think was probably a stone tape kind of thing. Now, let me tell you this. We were the first people to ever live in this house. We had it built on this land, but we still had a haunting. And we lived in Arizona, and a lot of people say things like, "Oh, it's Indian land and this and that." But I do believe that there was enough trauma perpetuated on Native peoples to leave a stone tape theory in the land. But we would see somebody walking down our stairs. Now, of course, there were no stairs there previously, so I don't know how to explain that part. But it was a boy. Everybody saw it. It wasn't a haunting. This particular one wasn't a haunt. I mean, it was a haunting as simply because it was paranormal. But it wasn't this particular one. There was many others that were quite different. This particular one wasn't harming anybody. It was just doing this particular act of walking down the stairs and walking towards somewhere else every day, over and over and over again. Until finally my husband saw it, and I've told this story plenty of times. It was like a cartoon where a grown man sees a teeny tiny mouse on the floor and he jumps on his couch. It was like that. To us, this was a teeny tiny mouse because we'd seen it forever. But he hadn't. And he jumped in the air and started yelling about, "Did you see that?" And we were like, yeah. We've seen it, but we went to this hotel called the Suburban Hotel in Oklahoma, and I have a video on here about the Suburban Hotel if you want to go through and my playlist and look it up. It's got video and the story of the Suburban's huge hotel, old, grand, one of those grand hotels with wood, everything, dark carved wood, everything, and gold and mirrors and we went in there for a murder mystery dinner. And for those of you who don't know what a murder mystery dinner is, you go to dinner, and during the dinner, there's a murder. Not real, unfortunately. I know they charge you extra if it's real. And then you have to solve it. You become the detective and find the clues. So we were there for this. We walked in, and he said, "It feels terrible in here. It feels bad." And I agreed. I felt the I it was bad. It was dark. It was a feeling that you can see in your head, like it's dark. The room looked, the huge entrance where they have seating and fireplaces. It was dark. We went to go up to the floor where our dinner was. We were there early. We were the only people there, and it was light outside. So it wasn't actually dark, like dark out. That was what was making it dark. It was light outside. And I was taking a bunch of photographs, and because I was going to make the video, and we, realized like, oh, hey, there's nobody here but us, and it felt like we needed to get out, which we did. We went somewhere else until we knew there'd be more people. The feeling was, I think, what they're describing for Stone Tape, as far as this particular part, as far as emotion, darkness. Have you ever felt that going into a building, Rob?
Yeah, a few times. I tell you who does feel it a lot. Grace.
Ooh. Grace does? Yes.
Yeah, Grace really gets them feelings. And they're quite debilitating sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Grace is. Do you remember when she was younger, she could see the orbs and stuff like that?
Yes, I remember. Mm-hmm.
I think maybe Grace might be like you. Maybe sensitive to certain emotions or emotional stuff that's happened in certain places. So, but yeah, sometimes it does bleed out, doesn't it? And I think ordinary people who don't have these feelings can feel them. Everybody gets that feeling, that gut feeling, don't they, when they go somewhere and it's just, I don't like this. I don't like this feeling. The goosebumps and the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. I think, oh no, maybe not. Maybe we won't stay here.
Oh, yeah, that's another thing my husband said. He said, "You'll never get me to stay at that hotel." Which the hotel, like I told you, is spectacular. And I have asked him for special occasions, can we go to the Skirvin? By the way, Oklahoma City, a famous football, was it LA? Football team, basketball team that would stay there. They would have the guy who changed his name to, what did he change his name to? Meta something. His team, I think it was LA, would stay there. They finally said that so many weird things happened to them that they requested that they never stay at the Skirvin again, and they'd stayed there for several years. And for playoffs and games and whatnot, that's the only hotel they stayed at. They finally changed hotels because of how scary it was. So you can look that up too. I can't think what Meta World Peace. There you go, Meta World Peace. Look up his story about the Suburban Hotel. So But it was, on the other hand, there's also places I've gone to that have, you can feel joy in them. I've gone to places that go, this has a really good feeling. The place I live now, contrasting to basically every place I've ever lived before, has a good feeling in it. Most, it's always felt good. The first house I ever bought in Spokane had a good feeling. I thought it had a good feeling in it. So, there are contrasts. I think the whole city of New Orleans has a good feeling for me, which is strange considering the history of New Orleans, but it feels good to me. Let's see. I wanted to say something else. In the 20th century, the idea that objects are able to store and play back past events was introduced in 1939 and 1940 by H. Price. Price speculated about a psychic ether, which is an intermediate medium between spiritual and physical realities, which can enable objects to carry memories, traces of emotions, or experiences from the past. In his works, he stated that the existence of such traces should be provable by means of scientific method, but yet they still remain unproven. The history of land or trees, stones having a memory goes back thousands and thousands of years. And so Rob and I were talking about this the other day, that one of the reasons why cultures tell their stories, their history, over and over and over and over and over again, not only to instill it for future generations, but to instill it in the land. There's a theory that words that are spoken can linger in the air. And so I'll tell you about that. Babbage speculated that spoken words leave permanent impressions in the air, even though they become inaudible after time. I think that's like nowadays when people say, like, just speak it out loud, just to bring to you what you want. I want to win the lottery. Put it in the air, put it in the atmosphere, put it in the ether, and it'll come to you. And I think that along those lines is the idea that other cultures would say their stories and it would be there. He said that they become inaudible after time, although he suggests that it is possible, due to the transfer of motion between particles, that maybe some people can hear those sounds, those words. Go ahead, Rob.
Excuse me. That is really interesting. That people, that when they're saying that some people, not all people, but some people like you, can hear those words or can hear those, because it's not just a case of seeing stuff, is it? It's a case of hearing and feeling, which you have always done. I mean, I've known this since the first time we talked, practically. That you've never said to me that you're a medium or you're whatever the else people say they are, psychic. You've always just said, I am, you can feel emotions.
Empathic,
that's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, I don't believe for a minute that I'm a medium. I don't believe that I'm a psychic. I don't even know if I believe in mediums and psychics, which is strange because I'm a person who can do this. I can feel things. I can also get vibrations. I feel a vibration if something bad is going to happen in my family. There's a vibration. There's energy all around us. And when I feel this vibration, and my son gets the vibration too, my son will say, I feel uncomfortable. I feel like something's different. I have a bad feeling. My youngest daughter can feel the same thing. My youngest daughter will say, I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel at home, which is her version of saying, and she's done it since she was a small child, and a really small child, and so has my youngest son. He's used the term too. I don't feel at home, which is interesting because they've both used it, and so that is, if you think about you going to a place that isn't your home, there's nobody you know, there's nobody you have anything in common with. You're there for whatever reason, and you have that unsettled feeling. Well, that's the feeling. That's how they get. I don't. I get a vibration. My body has a vibration, and I can say, and that turns into a very specific type of anxiety that I recognize as, oh shit, something's going to happen. And I'll call my husband and say, something's going to happen. I need you to be very careful. I need you to be extra careful. Something's going to happen. And the bad part about it is I don't get an understanding of what is going to happen.
Yeah.
I don't get that. I'm not even given a little crumb of what the bad thing is going to happen. But I have, like, 2 times in my life gotten the feeling so badly, so badly that I thought I would unalive myself if I didn't. Like, my husband used to travel to work all the time, for 10 years. He travels all over the state, all over the country. But 2 times I've left my house and driven to where he was because I thought I would unalive myself because that's what it felt like it was telling me to do, this vibration. I don't know how to explain it. I know it sounds crazy. I know that I felt crazy. And 2 times there's been deaths. Both times there was deaths. One time I got a phone call within 45 minutes of getting to my husband, and he was at the time 5 hours away, and I got the phone call that my grandmother had passed. So I do know when it's big news. Big news. But there's a whole range of other bad news that exists, and I don't get that. Something else I can do is feel history.
Yeah.
And Rob and I talk about this all the time. I want to feel history. Even right down to, they found this huge dinosaur in Texas a couple weeks ago. Massive dinosaur. And I said to Rob, oh my God, if I could just go feel that. It's how I experience history, by feeling it. An example, going to the Alamo. We went to the Alamo. Everybody was preoccupied reading the stories of Davy Crockett and looking at the uniforms. The thing is that those uniforms weren't the uniforms of the people who actually fought in the Alamo. They were just uniforms of the people who wore them in that time period. That doesn't interest me. That's not what I'm looking for. And I am the weirdo in the corner putting my finger in the musket holes. Were you going to say something?
I was just listening. I have got something to say in a minute, but we'll carry on.
So I'm the one in the corner by myself putting my finger in the musket hole. Because the reality is that musket, regardless of whether it did penetrate somebody or not, was meant to. The sole purpose of what made that hole in the wall was to kill somebody. And that's how I connect to history. There's fear in that. There's a great deal of fear in it. It's almost exclusively fear. You'd think that there would be hate and rage, but it's nearly exclusively fear. If you touch something like that, if you put your hand in something like that, it's fear. And I can see things. I look around and try to block out everybody that's in there right now and put myself as if I was in the building then. And I can see things. I can see bodies. I can see the people wearing the uniforms that they were wearing. I can hear it. I can hear the noise. I can smell the smell. As long as I am touching it. And Rob, will you tell the story about the Gettysburg? Tell me what you're going to say, and also please tell the story about the Gettysburg video, because I want to talk about that.
Yeah. No, it was. We were talking about this the other day, and myself and my youngest daughter went to Plymouth. I don't know if this was the place that I told you about, but we went and we did the touristy stuff and went out to a tweet and sent pictures of the food to Tracy because that's what we do.
Yes, that's what we do.
But we went also to Plymouth Rock, and it's made into this little place where you go to where the ship sailed from. And I was just thinking about that now, that you would love it. You would love to go there and just and touch it, and just be there, and it would be absolutely amazing for you to just think this is where they left England or Britain.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that kind of stuff. I am a history buff. I love that. So that's the first thing I think of when it comes to going to someplace historical. I cannot wait to touch it. Can you talk about the Gettysburg story?
Yeah.